Imagine a manifesto, right, that promises to just completely eliminate global war.
Oh, wow. Okay. Big promises right out of the gate.
Right. But not just that, it also promises to eradicate poverty, halt all environmental destruction, and get this, put an absolute end to you and your partner arguing over who forgot to take out the trash.
Okay, wait. Marital arguments, too. That is quite a leap.
I know, it sounds completely wild. But we are looking at a really bizarre document today that claims the cure to geopolitical warfare and, your domestic marital strife is actually the exact same thing,
Right.
which is doing absolutely nothing.
Doing nothing. Yeah, it's definitely a radical approach, to say the least.
It really is. So welcome everyone to today's deep dive. It is Sunday, May 3, 2026, and you are in for a truly mind-bending exploration today.
We really are dissecting just a wildly radical blueprint for human society. And I think what makes it so compelling, it isn't just the sheer scale of its ambition, but the incredibly counterintuitive mechanism it proposes to actually achieve world peace.
Yeah, the mission today is to really dig into this fascinating document from 2013. It's an excerpt titled The Second Home's Holographic Management Briefing. And this was authored by Su Feng, with the translation edited by Kinyu.
Right, right.
We're going to explore the audacity of this document's central claim, which is that it holds the actual key to solving quite literally every major global and personal crisis humanity currently faces.
So, okay, let's unpack this because we are not talking about some minor policy shift here.
No, not at all. I mean, the scope of the promises made in this briefing is just staggering. The text outlines a vision for what it calls a united global family.
A united global family.
Exactly. And the overarching goal of this second home, as they establish right at the beginning of the text, is to introduce a completely new way of life for humanity, like a total reset.
So what does that reset actually look like in practice?
Well, the primary objective is to foster what they call a three-tiered harmonious coexistence. So that means harmony among individuals, harmony within society at large, and then finally, harmony with the natural world. So the ultimate utopian trifecta, basically.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And the author, Su Feng, he doesn't shy away from listing exactly what this new lifestyle aims to eliminate. Like, the briefing explicitly states it envisions a world totally free from international conflicts, regional tensions, and ethnic disputes.
Which is already a massive, massive claim.
Right. But he keeps going. It claims it will rid the world of religious and political divisions, significantly reduce crime, and just entirely eliminate unemployment, famine, and environmental pollution.
It's like they just swept all these massive, deeply systemic global challenges into one basket and said, yep, we can definitively solve all of these.
Right, and I read that list in the source, and frankly, I was sort of tracking with it initially. Like, sure, we've all encountered utopian philosophies that promise to end war and pollution. That's kind of standard utopia stuff.
Standard issue utopian promises, yeah.
Exactly. But then there's this highly specific detail in the text that literally made me stop reading.
Oh, I know exactly which part you're talking about.
You do, right. Because the document doesn't just aim to solve, like, macroeconomic issues. It explicitly says it envisions a life free from the troubles, pain, and unhappiness often associated with marriage and family life.
Yeah, that is a jarring pivot.
I mean, I really have to push back on this. You cannot just engineer away domestic squabbles. It's one thing to claim you have some brilliant economic system to end famine, but the pain and unhappiness of marriage?
Right, because that's so deeply interpersonal.
Yes, it's rooted in human psychology, in the messy reality of two individuals just, sharing a life, sharing a space, sharing a bathroom. It sounds completely ridiculous to lump that in with international warfare.
I had the exact same reaction. It sounds totally absurd on its face. Like, how can those two things be in the same category?
Right.
But Schrifting's argument relies on a very specific philosophical foundation. It's this belief that the macro and the micro are fundamentally the exact same entity.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
Meaning, to the author, a geopolitical war over national borders and, say, a painful marriage dispute over personal boundaries, they aren't two different categories of problems.
They're not.
No. According to the text, they are the exact same disease, just presenting at different scales. They both stem from this profound misunderstanding of how the universe is actually structured.
Okay, so if we assume for a moment that the author is right, that international conflict and marital strife are just symptoms of the exact same underlying disease, what is the prescribed cure?
That is where it gets really interesting.
Because, I mean, you hear a list of promises that big, And the modern mind just immediately jumps to authoritarianism.
100%.
You think, well, to force everyone into perfect harmony, they must be proposing the most intense, heavily regulated, totalitarian control system ever invented. Like cameras everywhere, strict rules for everything.
But the great paradox of this document is that it proposes the exact opposite of that. Yeah. Transitioning from their ultimate goal to their proposed method, we find an answer that completely defies typical human logic when it comes to governance.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do they do it?
According to the text, they want to achieve this perfect global harmony by managing less. The author introduces this core concept called holographic management, and the text states unequivocally, quote, "The essence of holographic management is non-management."
Wait, non-management, so doing nothing to solve everything.
Literally, yes. The briefing defines this as the strict minimization of human intervention. So instead of trying to force outcomes through rules and laws and human will, it advocates for adopting what they call Tao management.
Tao management, like from Taoism.
Exactly. It means following the way of nature rather than imposing human desires and artificial controls onto society.
All right, I was trying to visualize the mechanics of this when I read it, and the best analogy I could come up with for you, the listener, is the concept of rewilding a garden.
Oh, I like that. Walk me through it.
So think about a traditional, highly manicured botanical garden. The gardener is constantly intervening. They prune every single leaf, they spray pesticides, lay down artificial irrigation, pull every weed.
Right. It's very hands-on, very controlled.
Very controlled. They micromanage the space through sheer human will to force an artificial order onto it. And if they step away for even a week, the whole system just collapses into chaos.
Because the order was entirely dependent on their constant intervention.
Exact.
What's fascinating here is how beautifully that analogy maps onto Feng's critique of modern society.
Yeah?
Because in our current global system, governments and institutions are basically those overzealous gardeners. We use laws, police forces, and border controls as our pesticides and pruning shears.
Yeah. Desperately trying to force this highly artificial order onto humanity.
Exactly.
While rewilding, on the other hand, is a completely different paradigm. In a rewilded space, the gardener deliberately steps back, they stop micromanaging completely, they just introduce native elements, step away, and let the natural ecosystem balance itself.
Right. The system does the work.
Yeah, the predators eat the pests, the plants regulate the soil's nutrients, the gardener actually trusts the environment to thrive on its own without their constant intervention.
Which is such a shift in mindset.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that sounds exactly like this Tao management they're talking about. Stepping back, dropping the pruning shears, and just letting the natural order take over.
It is.
Yeah.
And by applying ancient natural philosophies like the Taoist concept of wu wei or, effortless action to a modern social experiment, the text argues that our global crises are actually caused by our attempts to manage them.
That's wild. So the management is the problem.
Right. Human intervention is essentially the toxin poisoning the ecosystem.
But dropping the pruning shears only works if the garden is actually a deeply connected, self-regulating ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because if you just walk away from a random patch of dirt, you don't get a paradise, you just get weeds.
Very true.
Which is where the word holographic comes in, right? Because if the instruction is just, hey, do nothing, why label it holographic management?
Let's distinguish the specific scientific metaphors the author uses to explain why this ecosystem will self-regulate. Because the term holographic represents the fundamental worldview underpinning this entire philosophy.
Which is?
A worldview of extreme, unavoidable interconnectedness. The text asserts that the universe itself is holographic.
Okay, I need a refresher on the physics of that.
Sure. So, in physics, if you have a traditional photograph and you cut it in half, you lose half the image.
Right.
But if you have a holographic plate and you shatter it into 1,000 pieces, every single tiny shard still contains the entire, complete three-dimensional image.
Oh, wow. So the part contains the whole.
Exactly. The whole is in every part.
And the text translates that physics concept into human terms. I remember it explicitly stating, there are no isolated events or isolated phenomena. None.
Right. And the author shares this really visceral biological analogy to hammer it home.
Yeah, the toe splinter thing.
Yeah. They write that the Earth is a whole, just as an individual person is a whole. So if a tiny splinter pierces your toe, it isn't just an isolated toe problem.
Right, because your whole body reacts.
Exactly. Your brain registers the pain, your heart rate elevates, your immune system mobilizes white blood cells to the area. That one tiny splinter alters the state of your entire body.
And Shifeng argues the Earth operates on that exact same holographic principle.
Precisely.
The text also introduces a second framework alongside the hologram to really drive this point home. It outlines what we might call the butterfly effect of emotion.
Oh, yes. This part is fascinating.
The progression is meticulously mapped out in the document. It says if one person gets angry, that anger does not remain contained within them. It spills over and affects their family member.
Spreading the infection, basically.
Right. And then those family members carry that volatile energy out into the world, affecting their coworkers.
Yeah.
Those coworkers then affect their communities, their nation, and eventually that one person's anger impacts the entire world.
And the distinction between those two frameworks is really vital here, because the butterfly effect shows the linear chain reaction, like how a local event creates a global wave over time.
Okay, but the hologram is different.
Yeah, the holographic model is deeper. It suggests that because the individual contains the entire universe within them, fixing the internal state of the individual is literally fixing the universe.
So it's not just a ripple, it's a direct reflection.
Exactly. The actions and words of an individual or a family, physically and energetically, alter the entire global family simultaneously.
Which brings us to a highly controversial psychological implication.
I was wondering when we get to this.
We have to, because the text follows this logic of extreme connection to a conclusion that I frankly find incredibly alarming.
It is definitely confronting.
It says, and I quote, "There is no separation between internal and external. No such thing as private matters. Everything is a public matter. All internal affairs are global affairs."
Yeah, that is a tough pill to swallow for a modern reader.
It's impossible. Think about how deeply you, the listener, value your privacy. We put up fences, we password protect our devices, we lock our front doors.
We cherish our alone time.
We cherish the fundamental right to have a bad day in the privacy of our own living room. But this document completely obliterates the concept of privacy.
It does.
If my personal, private moment of anger is a matter of literal global consequence, the concept of personal privacy isn't just outdated, it actually becomes an active threat to world peace.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are zeroing in on the exact mechanism of how non-management is supposed to actually function.
Okay, how so?
In a genuinely holographic model, a boundary is just a dangerous illusion. A fence doesn't stop the energetic ripple of your actions any more than drawing a line on your ankle with a marker stops the pan of the toe splinter from reaching your brain.
Wow, okay, that's a disturbing image, but it makes sense.
Right. To achieve a conflict-free global family, humanity must completely surrender the illusion of isolation.
But practically speaking, how does stripping away privacy actually stop people from fighting? Is the mechanism here just, like, intense, crushing peer pressure?
That's a good question.
Because if you know your internal thoughts are public matters, do you just self-police your emotions out of fear of polluting the global ecosystem?
I see where you're going with this.
Right, because living with zero boundaries, where your bad mood is treated as an environmental hazard, it sounds like an emotional panopticon. It demands a level of psychological regulation that feels totally superhuman.
Well, the author would argue the mechanism isn't fear or peer pressure at all, but radical empathy born from a profound awareness.
Empathy.
Yes,
Yeah.
because if you truly deeply understand that harming your neighbor is literally harming yourself, because you are both shards of the exact same hologram, the desire to inflict harm just vanishes.
So it's not self-policing, it's just a loss of the desire to do harm.
Exactly. You don't need a law telling you not to stab your own hand with a fork, right?
Right, hopefully not.
Your nervous system regulates that behavior automatically.
Yeah.
So holographic management assumes that once humanity realizes its interconnected nervous system, we will just automatically stop harming each other without needing any external laws.
Okay, wait. If the solution is really just waking up to the reality that we are all perfectly connected and dropping the illusion of management, why aren't we doing it right now?
Wow, the million-dollar question.
There has to be a catch. Why hasn't this natural, self-regulating utopia just taken over the globe naturally?
Because of a massive, heavily guarded bottleneck.
I knew it. What is it?
The text reveals the prerequisite to this entire system. It explicitly states that before holographic management can even be attempted, individuals must first undergo something called soul purification.
Soul purification.
Yeah.
That is a deeply, deeply loaded phrase.
It is the absolute linchpin of the entire document. The author is unequivocal about this. Without soul purification, holographic management simply cannot be implemented. It is impossible.
What does that entail, though?
Well, the text notes that this purification is a complex and challenging endeavor. And if this psychological and spiritual cleansing isn't executed correctly, the whole idea of a self-regulating society just remains an illusion and will never materialize.
Okay, let's unpack this because I am seeing a massive, glaring contradiction in the logic of this blueprint.
Okay, let's hear it.
The ultimate utopia relies entirely on non-management, right? Zero human intervention, Tao management, letting the garden rewild itself freely.
Yes.
But the absolute prerequisite for even walking into this garden is undergoing a complex and challenging soul purification.
Right.
How do you enforce or guide a complex soul purification without heavily managing people?
This raises an important question about whether this is actually non-management or just extreme management pushed so deep into the human psyche that it becomes invisible.
Exactly. It sounds like a covert form of authoritarianism.
It's definitely critique many would have.
Utopian groups often hide their rigid rules under the guise of internal purification. I mean, if I have to be intensely conditioned, structured, and psychologically rebuilt before I am allowed to participate in your free, unmanaged society, then your society isn't unmanaged at all.
You're saying the management just happened earlier.
Yes. You just did all the managing on the front end. You built the perfect, compliant citizen who no longer needs external police because the police state is now literally inside their own head.
That is a highly critical yet entirely valid interpretation of the text's central paradox. And it is crucial to understand that this isn't just theoretical philosophy either.
Wait, what do you mean?
As the text outlines, an organization called Lifechanyuan actually physically created the second home to run a real-world experiment on this exact mode of management.
They actually put this to the test, like a physical community.
Yes. At the time this briefing was published in 2013, they had accumulated over 3 years of practical day-to-day experience living under this exact model.
3 whole years of attempting to live without external management, relying solely on internal soul purification.
Exactly. And based on that specific 3-year experiment, the author, Shuifeng, claims definitive proof.
He says it worked.
He asserts that holographic management is not an unattainable fantasy, but a realized ideal. However, he does place a massive caveat on this success.
I bet he does. What's the caveat?
He says it requires that society at large provide profound understanding, support, and patience while this new way of life takes root.
Huh. Think about what that 3-year timeline implies, though. The text admits this is a complex and challenging endeavor.
Very complex.
To rewrite human nature, to completely eliminate the ego that causes marital disputes and global wars, and to replace it with a perfect holographic awareness that doesn't happen overnight.
Definitely not.
Asking the world for patience and support implies that the transition period is incredibly messy. It implies immense friction as individuals undergo this rigorous purification process, shedding their deeply ingrained reliance on external rules and boundaries.
The author concludes the briefing with absolute, unwavering certainty, despite that friction, though.
Yeah.
He states, quote, "Holographic management is humanity's way forward. There is no other way."
No other way.
Yeah.
That is a definitive line drawn in the sand. They are asserting that human nature absolutely can be conditioned through this intense soul purification to a point where external governance becomes completely obsolete.
Right.
Where we naturally exist in harmony without laws, borders, or, marriage counselors because our internal state perfectly mirrors the health of the global state.
That is the grand thesis of the second home. It operates on the conviction that the only way to clean the external environment of the world is to ruthlessly clean the internal environment of the individual. Fix the micro, and the macro automatically heals itself.
Let's synthesize this journey, because we have navigated some truly radical philosophical territory today.
We really have.
For you listening, we started by examining a wildly ambitious 2013 blueprint, a design for a society that promises to eradicate everything from international warfare to arguments over domestic chores.
And we unpack the central paradox of achieving absolute societal harmony by entirely letting go of control, relying on the effortless action of non-management and the flow of the Tao.
Right. And then we dissected the science and psychology of a holographic universe, a boundaryless reality where personal privacy is literally an illusion and your private internal anger is a global environmental hazard.
Which is terrifying.
Totally terrifying. And finally, we confronted the immense bottleneck holding this utopia back, which is the daunting, highly paradoxical prerequisite of intense soul purification.
It is a societal model that essentially demands the absolute surrender of the individual boundaries in order to ensure the survival and peace of the collective.
Encountering these radical models is vital precisely because they are so challenging. Even if you hear the phrase complex soul purification and immediately recognize it as a potential Trojan horse for psychological control, the text still forces us to reckon with a very uncomfortable reality.
It does.
It forces us to ask ourselves, how deeply interconnected are our actions truly? Can we actually afford the luxury of believing our private resentments have absolutely no public consequences?
It fundamentally challenges the modern ideal of the isolated, independent individual.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, something that takes the core science of the source material and just flips it entirely on its head.
Okay, let's hear it.
The text argues fiercely for this holographic effect, insisting that your individual emotions ripple out to dictate the state of the entire world. The splinter in your toe determines the health of the global body.
Right, the micro dictates the macro.
But if the holographic model is genuinely scientifically accurate, it has to be a two-way street.
Oh, interesting.
If every single part contains the entirety of the whole, does that mean the chaos, the political conflict, the economic noise, and the environmental anxiety of the broader world are directly responsible for your own internal, personal anxiety today?
That is the reverse hologram.
Consider that for a moment. Are you ever truly generating your own private, isolated emotions inside the safety of your own walls? Or are you just a holographic shard, constantly and unavoidably reflecting the chaotic, unpurified state of the earth back onto yourself?
That is a lot to think about.
We will leave you to ponder that in your own life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.